Welcome to the Onebar Lupagus Show, your daily source for everything Minnesota Vikings.
Howdy, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the first ever episode of Spittin Fire with Koda. Today's episode called Flame On, because if you are new here, I am one of the biggest Marvel dorks you will ever meet. But bigger than that, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, so let's get started. For those of you who are confused as to who I am, my name is Dakota. I am a Minnesota Vikings content creator over on Twitter. You can find me at Spitfire Koda and on TikTok at Western Dakota. Oftentimes, I am using my knowledge of Minnesota Vikings football to make funny little skits. Sometimes I'll report on Minnesota Vikings news, and more often, I am using my love of the game Dungeons & Dragons to combine with my love of the Minnesota Vikings. I am so excited to be here doing this. Thank you so much to Onebar Lupagus for this amazing opportunity. I will be here every other week telling you about my Minnesota Vikings hot takes. So let's get started. I think first and foremost, the one thing that I want to talk about is the obvious. We're playing the Bears Monday night in Chicago. Now, granted, I don't know a single Minnesota Vikings fan that enjoys when we play Chicago in prime time, but for whatever reason, the NFL is really pushing that they're a bigger rival to us than the Packers. Whether or not that is true remains to be seen. I would say it definitely is not true. I'm not scared of the Bears. I don't think I've seen a single Minnesota Vikings fan or really anyone with a sound mind that is scared of the Bears. I will say the one thing that does concern me going into this game against the Bears is their new head coach, Ben Johnson. He's an offensive mind coach, seeing as he was just the Lions offensive coordinator. And now the Lions had a very explosive offense filled with weapons and a very good O-line. Whether or not the Bears have that same situation remains to be seen. Now, I personally like Caleb Williams. I think that given the right coach, which he currently still does not have, and I'll get to that in a second, he could be a generational quarterback. Now, like I said, I don't think he has the right head coach. We saw at training camp that he and Ben Johnson were getting into arguments fairly regularly. So I'm not entirely sure how good or cohesive this offense is going to be. Now, you never want to underestimate Ben Johnson, however. I do think that he will expose the fact that we have some holes in our secondary. Now, expose is a little bit of a harsh word to use. I don't think it's going to be as brutal as that sounds, but it isn't going to be pretty. I think that we will definitely come away from the Bears game with a W, but there is definitely going to be some reflection that needs to happen. Of course, there's also concern with it being JJ McCarthy's first actual regular season game, him only playing one game last preseason and a couple snaps this preseason. I personally think I'm ready. If y'all have followed me on social media for a while now, you know that I was one of JJ McCarthy's biggest fans while everyone was on the Drake May hype train. Ultimately, I do think that we come away from the Bears game with a W. I myself am sitting at a 21-14 win. Giving the Bears 14 points might be a little bit generous, though. Let's be honest here. The next thing I want to talk about, speaking of JJ McCarthy, obviously he's going to be quarterback one. That's shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. That shouldn't be an argument that anyone needs to bring up. It's quarterback two where I think a little bit of discussion should happen. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, I have always said on social media, are very intentional about the way that they do certain things when it comes to announcing things as a team. I think that they are very aware of their presence on social media, specifically Twitter. As I have said a couple of times, both on Twitter and on TikTok. And I think the way that they list out their quarterbacks specifically on their 53-man roster announcement is key here. Now, we've got two rookies, one veteran. Veteran, obviously, being Super Bowl winning quarterback Carson Wentz, which is insane, except for the fact that he hasn't really played in a regular season game against starters for a hot minute now. I was taking a look at Carson Wentz's record and his stats over the last couple seasons. And while he was with the Rams and the Kansas City Chiefs, most of the games that he played were usually in the January slot, meaning that he probably didn't play against very many starters because by that point, obviously the Chiefs had clinched whatever playoff spot that they had already clinched, probably seed one, let's be real here. So why do I bring this up? Well, Max Brosmer is listed second in the Minnesota Vikings 53-man roster, meaning that he most likely will be our quarterback 2 for the season. Now, I actually don't find this all that surprising considering how well he played in preseason. He's got a lot to prove, and one of the biggest things about him that I think makes him fit so well behind JJ McCarthy and why I would see him as a quarterback 2 behind JJ McCarthy is mentality. Mentality is huge with JJ McCarthy. He meditates. He is really big on a game day mindset. Now, a lot of people do have some arguments that he isn't really going to be in the zone, so to speak, on our first game of the season because his wife is expecting. And to that, I say, please shut up. Please shut up. Please stop talking. The man literally played through a knee injury against the Raiders in preseason. So we really think that he isn't going to be locked in just because his wife may or may not be in labor. We don't even know for a fact if she is going to be in labor at that point. And we'll come back to a similar topic on that subject in a little bit here. But I think in that sense of mentality, that is what makes Max Brosmer our obvious quarterback 2, given, again, the mentality, the amount of reps that he is getting in this preseason, and just seemingly more reps against starters than Carson Wentz has. Now, obviously, that could change. It could also be a sense that because he hasn't played in a hot minute, Kevin O'Connell wants to take a second to sort of talk to Carson, mentor him, get him back up to that level that we all know and love that Carson Wentz could be at, similar to how we did with Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. Now, I'm curious to see if that does ever actually change, if we do even see Max playing any regular season games, knock on wood. We don't, but you never know. It's the Minnesota Vikings. Let's be real here. I will say on that note, though, Carson Wentz being on the team is huge. He's got obviously what it takes to be a Super Bowl winner. And so I think purely he is there not just for that mentality of being a Super Bowl winner, but just his knowledge and his experience in general, I think is going to be huge to these 2 young rookie quarterbacks. Moving on from there, we have, speaking of veterans, Adam Thielen has returned to the Minnesota Vikings. Oh my God. If you know me, you know I love Adam Thielen more than anything. He was probably my favorite player after Kyle Rudolph left. So to have him back on this team is phenomenal, fantastic. Welcome back, Adam Thielen. We missed you so much. Now, Adam Thielen is here for, I'd say, 2 reasons. The first reason being wide receiver number 2, while Jordan Addison is suspended for 3 games, which is fine because I'm also considering myself suspended for 3 games because I am stage managing for the first 3 games of the season and probably will not be able to watch all of them. So that's fine. We come back at the same time. We'll be able to watch and play at the same time. But the nice thing about it is that I think it puts a fire under Jalen Naylor's blood, so to speak. I'm not entirely sure that Jalen Naylor is going to return back to the wide receiver 3 position. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually end up seeing more of Ty Felton or even Miles Price. I've seen a lot of articles floating around that Miles Price might be the sneaky sort of weapon that the Minnesota Vikings are not ready to unleash. I'm curious to see, though, who ends up winning the return man race, because there is kind of one of those going on in the Minnesota Vikings. I wouldn't be surprised if we start Miles Price or Ty Felton out there, and depending on who goes better, they end up in that wide receiver 3 position. Now, Jalen Naylor has attempted a couple of times to be our return guy. They didn't go so well. So I'm interested to see what race is won in regards to the wide receiver 3 and the return player position. Now, obviously, Adam Thielen is going to have that wide receiver 3 placeholder once Jordan Addison comes back. But based on the way that Adam Thielen is talking, I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last season in the NFL. And the fact that he took quite a big pay cut in order to be on the Minnesota Vikings, wide receiver 3 may be wide open next year. So that's something I would like to keep an eye on. Going back to kind of the whole pregnancy thing, congrats to Micah Parsons for needing an epidural for his spinal sprain. Interesting how that comes out after he's traded. Now, I like Micah Parsons. I read the New York Times article about him. I was definitely on his side. I am a certified Jerry Jones hater. But it's interesting to me that all of a sudden, out of the blue, now that he's traded, this supposed spinal sprain is coming out of nowhere. Now, granted, there were jokes made that he was sitting out of practice because of an injured back. So I don't think any of us really expected it to happen or to be real. Now, I have gone on the record of saying that this actually is not that good of a trade as people are making it out to be. Is it great for the Packers short term? Absolutely. Kind of, sort of. They also lost their 3 times Pro Bowl D-liner to the Cowboys. They also lost 2 first-round picks, which, in my opinion, they should have held on to fill some holes in their O-line, considering they have some pretty significant injury there. Not to mention with the way that Jordan Love has been playing. We really going to sacrifice our O-line when Jordan Love has started to develop a little bit of an injury history here, a little bit of a repetition when it comes to getting injured? Now, I mean, I myself have never needed an epidural, but the women who I've talked to who have gone through pregnancy say that an epidural typically numbs you from the lower back down, meaning you can't feel your legs. So, what exactly are they going to inject in him on Sunday that is still going to allow him to play? It's a little bit weird to me that all of a sudden this incredible, amazing defensive player out of the woodwork is injured. Also, does anyone else find it a little bit like not okay that they need to inject him with something in order to play? Cheaters! But hey, it's the Packers. Let's be real here. The league's going to do whatever the Packers want them to do. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about TJ Hockenson. You all know how much I love TJ Hockenson. Now, granted, I am a huge fan of TJ Hockenson. I love me a good tight end. Obviously, with Kyle Rudolph being one of my number 1 all-time Minnesota Vikings players. But I think this is a make or break season for him. He was injured for most of last season, obviously after the Lions game where he completely messed up his knee. Shout out to the Lions for being dirty players. But I still think that this is a make or break season. The last 3 seasons that he has been with us fully, he has had at least 1 fumble per season with a couple of more drops, a few more interesting catches that are less than stellar. His contract is up for renewal in 2027, meaning that 2026 would be his last contract season with the Minnesota Vikings. So he definitely needs to play this season like it is a contract renewal season. I wouldn't be surprised if we do end up seeing a more refined version of TJ Hockenson, fully recovered from his injury. I'm hoping that he definitely has done a lot of reps to minimize the amount of incompleted passes, fumbles. It sounds like he does have a really good connection with JJ McCarthy, the 2 of them having practiced on the offseason and him even asking JJ McCarthy to get a house in Nashville so they could practice more in the offseason. So I do think that that connection with JJ McCarthy will definitely minimize the amount of fumbles and incomplete passes that he has. But like I said, he's got 1 more season after this to prove that he deserves to stay on the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the Minnesota Vikings do believe in him. I was a huge supporter in us drafting Loveland in the draft. Obviously, him going to the Bears. They will rue the day they took him from me. But ultimately, I think that this is a make or break season for TJ Hockenson. I think Mac Brosmer is our quarterback number 2. I don't think the Micah Parsons trade is as good as people are making it out to be, since he seemingly hit a back injury from us and lost the Packers quite a bit of draft capital. And I think the Bears will expose some holes in our secondary. Not, again, detrimentally so, but just enough to make us reflect. That's all for me here on Spittin Fire with Koda. As always, drink the water, eat the food, and if y'all have something that you would like me to talk about, let me know. Send it in the comments or chat or however that this is going to be distributed. I promise I know, I swear. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and as always, SKOL Vikings.